everybody, it's Brock and we got a brand new episode of All About. Today we got an invert that could be your next pick in your reef tank. The Ritteri Anemone, or others call them the Magnificent Anemone. Just like the one you'd find at the beginning of Finding Nemo, this anemone has an abundance of long tentacles swaying in the current, giving home to families of clownfish and protection from predators. So, how hard is it to take care of one, and could you add it to your current tank? Let's find out. The Ritteri Anemone can sometimes be hard to come by. My local fish store just happened to have one this past week when I went, and I realized I've never done a video on one. Looking around online, it seemed about 50% of the stores had some in stock. On the other hand, they didn't, but the prices usually ranged from about $120 to $180. Our shop had this one actually for $90, and I was so tempted to get it. Tank size really doesn't matter for the Ritteri, but you need to realize that this anemone gets big, and those tentacles will sting the fire out of anything it touches. In the wild, these magnificent anemones have been recorded to get up to 3 feet wide, just massive, massive anemones. And in the tank setting, you'll typically see them get about a foot wide, sometimes bigger. I went and dug into some old footage of mine from 8 years ago when I had a very large Ritteri anemone in my 55-gallon reef tank. That one got up to 12 inches wide, and that's not even counting how far it could stretch its tentacles out. So keep that in mind when you're trying to decide if this one's good for your tank. Care level that you usually see around is listed as expert, and I'm not going to totally disagree with that, but I will say a big reason why they list them as expert is actually not your fault. A lot of times they get this rating because they're not an invert that's going to ship well. If you think about it, they catch the anemone in the ocean, they ship it to the distributor, and then they ship it to your local fish store or directly to you. So many fish, corals, and other inverts handle this process fine. Most of the fish in your tank right now are probably there because they just handle the shipping process. But there are some creatures in this hobby that just do not do as well with it. So you want to set yourself up with the best scenario to get the anemone acclimated into the tank as if it never left the ocean. Ways you can do this is 1. Have clownfish. This is a great anemone for clownfish to host. They will love it. In most cases, they host it fairly quickly. I've seen perculas, ocellaris, tomatoes, clark eyes, all host this anemone. So you have a good chance no matter what kind of clownfish you have in the tank. This also helps the anemone acclimate quicker to the tank, and the clowns are going to feed the anemone too, so it's a win-win. Surprisingly, in my experience with my maroon clownfish that you hear of so often, in that 55-gallon tank, I had a Ritteri, but he would never go to it. He always stayed close to his rose bulb anemones to go play. The second thing to set yourself up for success is good lighting. Now, as an invert, it gets most of its nutrition through a meaty diet, but they still have a relationship with algae through photosynthesis to produce energy in the anemone's tentacles. In the 55-gallon, they were under some bright T5s. And the other anemones you're seeing in the video, they were under Hydra 26s. So both produce plenty of lighting for the anemone to flourish. And the third thing is you have to have an established aquarium. I'd personally recommend a year-old tank. I would not try putting a Ritteri anemone in a tank that just finished cycling and the levels look okay. They can be very fragile, so any spike in the levels, a simple mistake you make as a beginner in the tank can make this invert perish very quickly. And you cannot dip the anemone in any sort of medicine. That's just going to make matters worse for them. So a good established tank that you've gotten the hang of will be really good for the Ritteri to get acclimated to. The temper of the Magnificent Anemone is most definitely aggressive, and it comes from them having those tentacles that will sting anything it touches, even yourself. So if your forearm happened to brush against those tentacles, it would feel like mini bee stings on your arm, and it does not feel good. I had the worst time cleaning my tank and forgetting he was there, and it would just sting the absolute fire out of me. The other pain point is they can move constantly in some tanks. Sometimes they never find a spot that they like. They like to move around. I honestly got lucky with mine in the 55 because I placed them near the top in a high current spot, and the anemone never moved for months from that area. The most he would do is kind of swing over to the right on the glass, but then he'd come right back. Now, you might ask, Brock, where's the anemone now? Well, one day when I was out of the house, it decided it wanted to travel far and wide across the tank, and it ended up getting caught in one of the power heads. It devastated the tank. Many of the fish and corals didn't make it. So it was not a good day, especially when just any kind of anemone gets caught in the power head. It can really mess some things up. So be aware of that. Put yourself in a position where if he does move, he's not going to end up in a power head. Now for levels, temperature, you can keep it 72 to 78. Mine sits right at 78. pKh 8 to 12, pH 8.1 to 8.4, and your salinity 1.023 to 1.025. There are also some other levels you can track and dose to give your anemone the best results in your tank. Those would include things like calcium, magnesium, strontium, iodine, and trace elements. You'll really set yourself up for success having those at the right level. Now for your current, always seen the best results with a strong current on them. These anemones are found in deeper waters, but they're also found even just a foot below the surface of the water. So you can imagine they're getting hit with some heavy waves, a lot of flow, so you want to mimic that in your tank. Placement is high. I've seen tanks where they try to place them towards the bottom and the anemone will just make its way up to the top to get the most lighting. So it's my opinion, just start them up high and see where they set up home. Lighting can range from low 30 par up to 150 par. I just study the anemone and see how they react to what you currently have set up and adjust the levels as needed. For me, I needed to add more because he stayed a little shrunk up for too long, so I started adding some more. In this case, it was more T5s. But once I added more, he was much more happier. So I could tell he definitely wanted some more light. Diet's going to consist of meaty foods like mysis, brine, krill, oysters. One of my favorite things to do was buy a bag of raw, unseasoned shrimp from the grocery store. I'd let it thaw out in some salt water, and then you could take a piece of it and place it on the tentacles, and that anemone would just wrap up super fast, grabbing that food to get it to its mouth. I always like to say the piece of food that you are feeding them should be smaller than their mouth. Otherwise, the anemone will eat what it wants. Like, he will take in a big old piece of food if you gave him too much, but he's eventually going to spit out the rest that he didn't eat. And so that food floating around is going to lead to ammonia or nitrate spikes if you don't take it out or even realize that he spit it out. I feed mine once a week, and it seemed very happy with that. Just kind of look at them, tell. Sometimes if they're staying shrunk up too much, that usually means you're feeding them too much. So just try to get a feeling for them. Mine was once a week. Try the same, see if he wants more. After feeding the anemone, they can look deflated, but give it time. Usually by the next morning, they'll perk back up and the tentacles will be full again. If you see them staying shrunk up for 3 to 5 days, then you might want to start checking some levels and making sure nothing's bothering them. Origin is the Indo-Pacific area. Do Ritteri anemones split like rose bulbs? It's a big question that comes up. And yes, they will split, but it seems very rare and not as common as rose bulbs do in my experience. The Ritteri I had in my 55-gallon tank was there for almost 2 years and never split. I never saw them do it. So you can probably find people out there selling aquacultured Ritteri anemones, but I'd bet they're pretty hard to find just because it doesn't seem to happen that often. And as a reminder, they are venomous, so they will sting your surrounding corals. They will sting you. One thing I did notice is I had a torch coral in my 55, and that was like the only one that if it stung the anemone would shrink up. But otherwise, the anemone took over everything. Anything that got by it, it was stinging it. So your pores in your hands are usually too small for them to sting you whenever you are handling them, but anywhere else is fair game. So maybe wear some gloves when handling them, put some bags over your hands, and also make sure to wash your hands before and after. When acclimating the anemone, make sure you do a slow drip and place them in the tank by putting the bottom portion against a rock and just lightly hold pressure there for about 30 seconds for their foot to grab a hold of that rock. I usually will do this with all the current turned off and then leave it off after he grabs that rock for about 20 minutes just to make sure they got a nice grab. Sometimes if you do it too soon and turn the power heads back on, you'll see him, he's floating around the tank trying to grab on again. So take your time with it and he'll grab onto that rock. And let's close it there, y'all. Hope y'all enjoyed this video of all about. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. If you have any questions or experience with this anemone, leave it in the comments down below for future hobbyists to see and learn from. As always, stay safe, be kind, and I'll see y'all later.